Hello, welcome back. I've been doing a lot of research on an amino acid called taurine and the effect that it has on our health, longevity, health span, and all these different areas of health. So I was interested in seeing what other creators, other people, especially on TikTok, thought about this amino acid. I'll bet you there's going to be a lot of hype related to this amino acid. So let's see if the research, which will be linked in the description box to my video on the research that I'll be discussing throughout this, matches up with what TikTokers have to say. I suppose I should reverse that. What TikTokers have to say, does that match up with the research? Let's get into it. Okay, this first video is some sort of interview. No idea who these people are.
There was like a week-long period where you were going off on taurine. It was like your favorite nutrient for like a month.
Well, so taurine acts kind of like psyllium husk in bringing down LDL cholesterol. It like brings it down a lot, substantially.
Okay, let me stop right there. Taurine has very mild effects on LDL cholesterol. LDL are low-density lipoproteins, which means that they are these particles that contain cholesterol molecules, which is different from the actual particle itself, and triglycerides. And what we're focused on here, LDL-C, is a measure of the cholesterol molecules that are found inside the particles. And there's a relationship between those two, but they're not exactly one-to-one, as in you could have more cholesterol molecules and fewer cholesterol particles, or you can have more cholesterol particles and less cholesterol, the actual cholesterol molecules around. That's a little bit beside the point, but the point being that I have looked at the literature on taurine and taurine supplementation and LDL cholesterol, and meta-analyses that have looked at it indicate that in healthy people, it really has a very mild effect, if any effect whatsoever. So it wasn't statistically significant based on the analysis that I looked at. However, on the other hand, when looking at people with metabolic syndrome, so people that are obese, people with cardiovascular disease, people with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, it does seem to have a small effect at lowering LDL-C. But does it substantially decrease it? No, it doesn't. And I would say that psyllium husk, which does reduce LDL, it probably has a stronger effect on LDL than taurine ever will.
It can crash blood pressure.
Okay, this is another massive over-exaggeration. It does not crash blood pressure. Yes, it has an effect on blood pressure, but it has a pretty small effect. I'm talking like 5 or 6 unit points.
Almost as good as like blood pressure medication, like high doses. It helps.
No, again, 5 to 6 millimeters of mercury, that's it, by an ancient metric, so 6 units in general, which is not nearly as much as some blood pressure medications, which can drop at 20 or 30, depending on the starting point. If a person is really pathologic and is in 150 over 90 or something like that, that's a completely different story. They're going to see a pretty substantial drop. But taurine is not going to be as effective as a blood pressure medication. Most blood pressure medications, that's for sure. So this is a gross over-exaggeration.
It's like glucose. It's like helps with everything. It's like amazing. But like it's only in animal foods. And interestingly, it has like mental effects as well. They gave it to people who had like psychotic episodes. And they had a faster rate of recovery from psychotic episodes having the taurine supplementation. It was incredible.
Okay, I haven't looked at that last claim, so I don't know. But considering the previous 2 or 3 over-exaggerations, I guess I'll quick address it. Taurine does reduce blood sugar levels as well. Again, a really modest effect, maybe 4 or 5 milligrams per deciliter, so not a whole lot. Taurine is definitely effective, but it's not this incredible clinical discovery that it can overcome every other specific drug that targets these different outcomes like blood sugar, blood pressure, etc. So it's effective, but this is a gross over-exaggeration. Okay, I'm assuming this one is going to be talking about taurine at some point. It says doesn't drink caffeine, but we'll see.
Taurine, it'll say like extra taurine.
What is it though?
Taurine is okay. So you have no caffeine in your life.
A little bit of green tea. That's about.
I like the switch there. it's got taurine. Wait, so you don't drink caffeine? Those aren't the same thing. Those are two completely different molecules. Yeah, they're paired often. If you're talking about like in energy drinks, Red Bull, for example, is really famous for having taurine in it, and now many other energy drinks have taurine in them. But they're not the same molecules. It's kind of funny to have that switch. Probably because it seems like she didn't actually know what taurine was, so she just kind of switched it to caffeine. Everybody knows what caffeine is. Anyway, beside the point.
Okay, tell me, I need to know, what do you...
I have horrific insomnia, so if I have any caffeine on top of that, I won't sleep for like a year.
Yeah,
I
I also, that's why you get a horrific Lunesta addiction.
Is that
Like
Lunesta
me.
works?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, I don't really take it anymore. I used to have same insomnia. Have you gone to someone about it, or?
Yes, I went to 2 sleep doctors. You know what these motherfuckers told
There's no
me?
such thing as a sleep doctor.
Okay, there are sleep doctors. I don't know what that's all about. I mean, if you have insomnia and you're extremely sensitive to caffeine, it makes complete sense to avoid caffeine. Absolutely. But again, since this is a video about taurine, I should say, I mean, taurine, as far as I know, doesn't have any like potent sleep effects or anything like that. So it's probably not going to be used for something like that. Not that they were specifically pointing that out. If you wanted to supplement for something for sleep, I've done investigations on glycine, which has some mild effects. For certain people, it has really potent effects. For some people, it has no effect. But the average is a mild sleep aid. Another one is L-theanine before bed seems to help. And obviously something like melatonin is probably going to be a more potent effect. But then some people experience like grogginess and drowsiness the next day. And it also matters how you take your melatonin. If you take just a single capsule that's just a quick release, an acute release, that tends to be effective at starting to get you to sleep. And maybe you'll fall asleep, but then you can't stay asleep. So a lot of people wake up. That's mainly because, or one of the reasons, I should say, one of the reasons, because there are many reasons, but related to circadian rhythms and a bunch of other reasons. But the one reason is because they're not taking extended release melatonin, which is another thing that people should consider. If you're taking a melatonin, consider using an acute release as well as a long release over several hours. Anyway, nothing to do with taurine, but since the video itself wasn't that much about taurine, just I'd go ahead and add a little bit of useful information. And sleep doctors are a real thing. Okay, so I don't know who these people are either, but I always chuckle at these like grocery store aisle videos. It's usually somebody that picks something off, and then I guess I can see by the title here, taurine proven dangerous in energy drinks, ? Usually they go grocery store and they just start picking up random things, and they just start looking at the ingredient list and they just point at something. Alpha daldomagulate. Are you kidding me? If you can't pronounce it, then it is horrible for you. That's kind of nonsense, but we'll put that aside for a different time. I mean, yeah, you want the simpler the food, the less risk that there is of some sort of interaction or whatever it might be. But anyway, it's beside the point. But they'll just point at something and just say, this is so dangerous, and then they'll make like relationships to something else. So I'm curious if that's what's going to happen here. I have seen this guy before, this Bobby guy, I think his name is, but I have no idea who he is or like what he does or anything like that. I'm assuming he's in the health sphere somehow.
You will not believe what Bobby said about taurine in our energy drinks.
A lot of these will have the active ingredient of taurine, boosts mental and physical performance. But the amount of taurine they put in these energy drinks is usually 10 to 15 times the amount you would normally get. And that much taurine will lead to elevated blood pressure and heart rate, which is why you end up in the hospital sometimes, especially for the kids. It gets kind of scary.
Okay. Got a lot of things to say there, Bobby. One, I mean, that energy drink had 1,000 milligrams, so 1 gram. In randomized controlled trials, they've used all the way up to 6 grams and higher, but most typical is between 3 and 6 grams. So they're already consuming, researchers and medical doctors are already giving people 3 to 6 grams of taurine to consume. And the effects are exactly the opposite of what Bobby said. He said that there's a skyrocketing in blood pressure. That doesn't happen. There's, if anything, it's a neutral to a small reduction in blood pressure, which we went over earlier. And then another thing is, Bobby mentions that there's an increase, a rapid heartbeat. So that's counterintuitive, because usually if your blood pressure increases, you typically see a decrease in heartbeat, unless you're talking about a pathology. That's a completely different story. But if you're just consuming something and it's going to have a normal physiological effect, which taurine will, that's usually the opposite. So if you were to see an increase in blood pressure, you would see a decrease in heart rate. The reason why is because your body is trying to circulate a certain amount of blood every minute, let's say. And it adjusts a number of things. So it'll adjust stroke volume, or the amount of blood that gets pushed out of the heart, or it'll change the actual heartbeat. And it usually doesn't increase both of them at the same time. So it's a little bit confusing. But going back to what the actual evidence says on blood pressure, for example, there's no doubt that taurine decreases blood pressure, or at least at the very worst has a neutral effect. So let's see what this guy has to say.
So you see how Bobby cherry picks this 40 to 400 milligrams of taurine from this article? But that same article suggests that taurine could potentially lower your blood pressure, but he conveniently ignores that because it won't scare you. You see this delicious ghost energy drink that he's warning you about? Well, it has 1,000 milligrams of taurine. That amount of taurine is perfectly safe. As you can see right here, humans can consume up to 10,000 milligrams in one day and be perfectly safe. So you might ask, why is he doing this? Based off Bobby's track record, he's trying to scare you from anything in the grocery store, like when he was demonizing all the protein powders that you can find at the store. Then shortly after, coming out with his brand new overpriced protein powder, in which you get 20 servings for almost $60. Not to mention, this isn't even real protein. Half of it is from collagen.
Yeah, wow. I mean, like I said, I don't know Bobby at all, but if that's true, that is pretty comical. I mean, that's definitely an overpriced protein powder. In addition, the addition of collagen. I don't have a problem with collagen, but specifically for building muscle, collagen is a horrible protein source. So that's interesting. Other protein powders, just as an aside, are perfectly fine. I mean, as long as they don't have like any sort of heavy metals or toxic metals in them, which there's been a few times in the past decade or two that some of those have leached in, but it really depends on the where you're sourcing it from. If you're getting it from a good source, protein powders are perfectly fine. But again, to discuss taurine, yeah, I mean, this guy brings up people can consume up to 10 grams in a day. Now, of course, the next consideration is, can they do that over weeks or months and still be healthy? The answer is yes. So at least based off of the randomized controlled trials that have looked at taurine up to this point. So yeah, I mean, it's a good counterpoint by this guy against this Bobby dude. Don't agree with Bobby dude. Okay, so the next and final video is Dr. Andrew Huberman talking about, I'm assuming, taurine. We'll see what he has to say.
Interestingly, theanine is now being introduced to a lot of energy drinks.
There's a mistake. It's theanine instead of taurine. I guess maybe I picked the wrong video, but you know what? Let's just throw it in here anyway.
In order to take away the jitters that are associated with drinking too much caffeine or with some other things that are in the energy drink.
Okay, so let me stop there. I have done some research on L-theanine, and that is true. I'm assuming he's talking about L-theanine. The way it was spelled there in the caption was incorrect, but let's just assume that it's L-theanine, which is usually paired with caffeine, and it does seem to have an effect at kind of quieting a person's nerves. So it's certainly something that has been robustly used in combination with caffeine across, I think, at least 4 randomized controlled trials have looked at that.
Some other things that are in the energy drinks. Energy drinks can be problematic. They can contain a lot of L-taurine, I'll just tell you an anecdote. When I was a
we are
postdoc,
talking
I was
about
drinking
taurine.
a lot of a particular energy drink, has a lot of taurine in it. And actually the whites of my eyes, the sclera as it's called in my eyes, turned beet red. And I went to a friend who's an ophthalmologist. I said, look, I'm not a marijuana smoker. I haven't been hit on the head. I don't know what's going on. And he looked and he said, I think you've got some microvascular damage. And we walked through what I was taking and doing. And he said, oh, it's probably the taurine. Excessive levels of taurine can create some microvascular damage. So if you're having the microvascular damage in your eye, you probably have microvascular damage deeper in your skull. So I stopped. That's the reason why I don't take energy drinks. Again, I'm not here to tell you what to do or not do, but just want to arm you with information.
Okay, I'm a little surprised by that take, mainly because, too much of anything is going to be damaging to your body. So to isolate taurine and then say, well, if I consume too much of this and it caused microvascular damage, which we don't know, but let's just roll with it and assume that that's the case, that we know that for a fact, which we don't, to be clear. It's a little odd to say that therefore taurine causes microvascular damage, or therefore taurine is detrimental to your health. I wouldn't ever jump to that conclusion. If you, again, to be clear, that the operative word here is overconsumption of something. If you overconsume water, you'll die. You'll experience a condition known as hyponatremia. If you overconsume any substance, at a certain point, eventually it gets to be extremely destructive. So I wouldn't have framed it that way. In addition, we're basing things off of an anecdote as opposed to looking at the science, and the science does indicate that taurine, as I've mentioned before, seems to have some mild to moderate improvements in health across a number of different health metrics. In certain ways, it shows neutral effects. In other ways, it shows some small positive effects. Anyway, so I'll just respectfully disagree with Dr. Huberman on this one. And of course, but I will of course agree, I'd have to look at the research, but I'd agree that if you overconsume something, you're gonna have some negative health consequences as a result. Well, that's what I got for you. Hopefully you learned something from taurine, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.